And I wonder if you want your portraits that you create, whether they're paintings or drawings, to just be a beautiful window to the personality, the heart, the expression, the essence of the individual. Wouldn't that be powerful? Well, that's what this is going to be all about today. We're going to talk about how to paint expressive eyes in pastel, a powerful subject. We'll talk about anatomy and the structure of the eye and how it sits within the socket and how that's an important part of sculpting the eye. We'll talk about light and shadow and how to convey that through your pastel hues. And we'll talk about reflections and just really capturing that glimmer as well. And of course, we'll just paint the eyes and see how things come together. And wonderful techniques and principles will unfold as we do. It's going to be really great. So thanks for joining me on this live. And as we talk about expressive eyes, I am so excited about Portrait Week. It's coming up really soon, March 17th through the 21st. And it's just a great opportunity to go through the creation of a portrait together. Now, maybe you've thought, I'd love to paint a portrait, but you never felt quite confident or you weren't sure that you could do it. This is your moment. This is the opportunity because we'll go through lots of exciting steps from the more structural and proportions related themes, things like the expressive eyes and taking a look at the structure, but we'll do that with the whole head. We'll go through values and really move through color application and ultimately that painterly refinement. So I just want you to know that you are so wholeheartedly invited to Portrait Week. You can visit portraitweek.com, learn all about it, and join us for a wonderful adventure. This is it. It's a risk-free opportunity to experience the thrill of seeing a portrait come to life and having your own portrait by the end of the week. It's going to be so fun. So thanks for joining me. Okay, I'm excited. We're going to the easel in just a moment because I want to obviously share with you the subject that's going to help us look at those eyes. And he's a sweet little Rwandan boy. I met him a number of years ago when I was in Rwanda. A piece of my heart is still there. You know, I've left pieces of my heart all over this beautiful planet, maybe in your neighborhood too, but this one definitely is special. So let's check it out and we'll talk about this handsome guy. What we're gonna do here is I'm just gonna sketch right on this dark gray sheet. This is just a dark, charcoal gray sheet of pastel paper. And this little man has very expressive eyes. It was breakfast, and I think he's looking for seconds. He had himself a little breakfast. We can see the evidence of that around his face. But we're not talking about lips today. We're talking about eyes. And he's like, ooh, I wonder if I can have more. So let's just jump in. I'm going to use, this is vine charcoal. And what I'd like to do first is talk a little bit about the structure of the eyes. I'm going to use one other really important tool. It's this stick, and this stick just helps me to kind of check the axis of the eyes and maybe do a little measuring, okay? So if you think about the eyes, in one sense, you've got two little balls that are connected across an axis, and this stick could be the axis of the eye. So if we were to just take the axis, it's not totally a straight line in this case. It goes, let's say it goes this way, okay? And so we've got an angled axis of the eye representing those two balls. Now, you wouldn't want to paint eyeballs without eyelids and without all the other stuff, but it is important just to think about it for a moment, okay? So what I'll do is I'm gonna just draw a little circle here. There's a circle, and that's one eyeball. And that's just for us to kind of imagine, because we don't want to think things are flat, right? This isn't flat. There's structure to it. As a matter of fact, the eyeball kind of is, there's the front plane of it, right? It's a circular movement. And then if I were to look, I could probably see from one side of so the eyelid lays over that eyeball, right? And that's why the eyelids are not flat either. They're curved, and it extends beyond, and it comes around and goes right around that other side, right? So if this eye starts here to here, then I can look, there's about one eye between the eyes. Now, if we were perfectly frontal, you would see that the left eye and the right eye are the same size. When there's an angle, it's always going to be a little smaller as it recedes away from us. So, but in this case, it's about one eye between the eyes still. And then if I went another, it's not going to be this far all the way to that other eye. But you'll see now that I have kind of a space between. And again, I could draw that other circle. There's that second eye, and anytime the head moves, both of those eyes would move, right? So we've got the eyeball, we've got the iris that sits on the middle of that, right? There, and then the pupil, which is in the middle of the eye. Those are all those little sections, right? They look out. Now this looks really weird and anatomical, but we're gonna draw lids right over it, and it'll kind of disappear in a moment. But it's important for us to think about the sphere shape of the eyes right now, because it really helps us to understand that anatomy or structure and realize that there's a lot more going on here to influence why these lines are here. I'm making an eyelid that lays over the eyeball, right? And as I do, actually, I'm going to move this guy over a little bit, the iris. The iris is the colored portion of the eye. It's the part that has all that beautiful color, in this case, that gorgeous, deep, rich brown of our little boy here. And just beautiful. And it's going to look a little bit bigger on the right, closer to us, just slightly, not terribly larger. It's not an extreme angle here, but it's good to realize that that's the case. So we've got these lids, but it goes well beyond that, because we have this bony mass, right? If we could do another line up here for the brow line, and we don't want straight eyebrows like that. We are going to create expressive eyes. The eyebrows are such a big part of that expression that happens. And there's a big upturn, this guy's very curious. What's going to happen? Am I going to get more breakfast? This is really exciting, right? He's thinking. And his eyebrows are doing a lot of the expressive power. Of course, even moving this way, we have a structure of the brow and that bone of the brow line, which moves back, and then that comes back into this kind of little bony section here. And then we have the lid of the eye, and then under, in a way, the eyelids are like lips, in that lips surround the mouth, the eyelids surround the eyeball. And so again, we don't want to see that whole eyeball. That would be weird, but it's there, and it's influencing how we see these eyes and the structure of them, right? So we're actually curving around those eyes, as you can see. Really wonderful, because that gives form and structure. Now, that top lid, the one that covers the eye, actually has the lashes on it, right? So a lot of times I'll call that the lash line. And that's where the eyelashes are. They're thicker to the right side where they start to fill out. And I tend not to make lots of little specific individual eyelashes, but I like to indicate the fullness there. And then we come into that inside section of the eye, nice little corner. You can see this is a little smaller than the eye on the right. I've got to widen it slightly. Coming under the eye on that lid line, there's a little bit of eyelashes on the outside. It's not as strong, but it's there. And so we've got the ball of the eye, the iris, our pupil is in the middle, and it's going to be right in the center. Whenever we have that sort of center line of the eye, that pupil is going to fall right there. So in order for this eye to look away, we've got to be realizing that the center of the eye is located in the right spot, okay? So a little bit of work done there to make sure we've got one eye between the eyes and that the eyeballs are looking off in the distance. Okay, so that's that. Let's come back to just a little bit more work on the brow, because I consider the eyebrows, we call them eyebrows for a reason. They're part of the eyes. They really do express so much of the emotion. They carry a lot of the expression. And if I get a different angle of these brows, I might suddenly make this little boy look angry, or look upset, or look confused, right? Instead of curious. And so many expressions that can be made, but it's really important that we think about how the brows both sit on that bony mass and they follow that same axis, but also they move with the muscles of the eyes to express emotion, okay? So I've got some description here. the one other area, probably before I get rid of this vine charcoal, that I'd like to cover with you is, oh, this is a kneaded eraser, my friends, and I'm just going to come up under that eye and just lift it, is to show you that even below the eye, right, the skin below the eye is still kind of sunken into the eye socket. So there's some muscles around the eye that help it to, you know, do its job and express. And I like to think about that whole socket and then coming under the eye. Now, some people actually call this, you know, these butterfly wings. See, you can almost see the wings, right? And the two sockets to the right and to the left, it's the most symmetrical, again, when someone is facing us, but you can see it here, can't you? You can see that the socket coming down and around the eye and then under with some of the eyelid, the skin around the eye kind of wrapping is still part of that quote unquote butterfly wing, okay? So yeah, there's a nice kind of description of the drawing. We're gonna just layer some simple color in. So what I wanna do before I get into that, I'll just grab this is a dark brown, like a reddish brown. But if you're interested in how this is constructed and how those eyes sit together, I really think you're gonna love Portrait Week, because we're gonna get into the proportions of the head. And I'm gonna teach you some techniques so you can kind of handle the proportions of the head, which is important, right? Keeping the structure of the head. We've got a really fun way for you to understand how to do that. And we'll get into values as well and how to really see abstract shapes. And then we'll really dive into the scaling up and development of a likeness, layer those colors, get into that painterly application, and then ultimately that loose refinement. So really, if you're enjoying like thinking about the way these eyes are being constructed so that they can be lifelike, but also look realistic and loose, you're gonna love Portrait Week. I really just want to encourage you to join, because I think you're gonna come away with some fabulous new techniques that are gonna help you in all of your portrait work, okay? No matter what medium anyone uses, they're gonna apply. Okay, so I'm gonna jump in here and just start squinting. So because I can see the structure, I can tell that the light is hitting the planes that face up, right? So anything that's facing up is receiving light. Anything that faces away is getting a little darker. And of course, this boy has beautiful brown skin. It's got some gorgeous warm reds. And so I'm gonna layer some of that darker reddish brown in on those forms of the eyebrow that are kind of turning in shadow, okay? And the eyeball, we often think of the eyeball as a white area, and certainly it is white. If I were to grab this black, I can go a little darker, but it's not white in this as a painter's white, right? Like we wouldn't use white to describe the whites of the eye. That's going to be important. We really want to think about the form and the uniqueness of the subject before we go that dark. I'm just adding some hard pastel. This is a black new pastel, just to get those brows even darker, okay? Actually, I'm gonna use a piece. This is a black new pastel, and I'm just using the side of it. So we can think about structure, but also make some little choppy marks to develop the shape there. And I'm coming on that lash line with this black just to strengthen and darken that statement. He's got these wonderful, almost little coy, sleepy eyelids. And how much can I get away with eating this morning? I love this. The story behind this little sweetheart is his mom, and I was actually in an event with a relief organization that was teaching mothers in rural Rwanda how to, feed a nutrient-rich porridge diet, like this kind of porridge that had all kinds of good nutrients for the kiddos. And so that's why he has a little bit of food on his upper lip from all that delicious porridge. Okay, so now we're pushing in some of the black, and I can get underneath. I'm gonna grab my Cordovan or purpley brown hard pastel and just add some color into the iris area. This is the colored section of the eye. This isn't even dark enough. I'm going to need something darker. Actually, I'm going to use a really nice dark brown. This is a soft pastel dark brown that we'll give a try here. And using the dark gray paper, already we've got really deep, rich darks. So we're going to need, you know, to state those lighter values that will carry some power and give some of the sense of form once we get this in. But I always love to address the darks first, even when I'm working on a darker surface, just to anchor those values and make sure that it's all where it belongs. Okay, now the iris typically has a little dark rim around it. Now, depending on the color of the eye, that dark rim might be, you know, if it's blue eyes, it might not be terribly dark, but if it's a brown-eyed subject like this, it's almost black, that little rim, and even the shadow being cast over his eye is making the top of the eye pretty dark, okay? So even though he has dark brown eyes, we're seeing a lot of, you know, that eyelid is shadowing the top of the iris from the light. So we're pushing that darker. That lid line, I'm just pushing a little more black into that as well. And I'm going to come in here and just add a bit of color under the eye. And again, I'm thinking about the form. You see how I'm like chopping with, you know, thinking about the form of the subject. This is a little warmer towards the red. And we cover skin tones. This beautiful boy is a type 5 skin tone. We cover the skin types and how to handle skin color. We'll talk some about that as well in Portrait Week, and how you can use some beautiful rich color in your skin tones, even while you're trying to capture sort of, you know, something realistic. I always like to say, loose doesn't have to mean inaccurate. You can be loose and accurate. So what I'm trying to do here is start to bring a little more light on the, actually want to find, I'm going to use a really warm, this is a really warm reddish color, very, very warm from, actually pulled this out of my portrait set. It's a Terry Ludwig, it's very soft. Just start to let that bone under the brow become bolder and stronger as the light hits it, right? That's a nice area where that comes forward. And so lightening that, adding some of that mid-tone is going to help us to see that. Okay, that looks great. I'm going to come back to that darker just around the eye for a moment, just to kind of frame it. And then moving under the eye, we'll start to have this lighter mauve and also on the eyelids. So this is really where we're going to start to see that the plane has changed. And instead of like being inside of the eye, we're going to be around it. We're going to be around that socket. The socket goes in and holds the eyeball to protect it in many respects, and to make it a beautiful, eyes are like a jewel set within a beautiful crown. So the lower lid is fascinating because there's a catch light on the lower lid. You'll see some light strike it. And I'm just going to start to use this kind of mauve-y color just to layer something into the quote-unquote whites of the eye. Just add a little something in there. Add a little something on the lid. So now we're thinking about, okay, dark, the lid catches the light, then the iris is shadowy, and then we get some light down on the cheek here, okay? And as I take a look, I'm going to shift gears in a moment with color and try to use a little more brown just to mix it in. Sometimes if it gets too red, we'll just be careful with that. We're just staying right around the eyes here for this demonstration, just to think about how to create expressive eyes. If you want to create that whole head, that's where Portrait Week comes in. We'll help you to create your own beautiful pastel portrait by the end of the week. Here we go. So I'm just going to take a look here. Yeah, I can start to see how that layer is under the eye. I need another brown. I'm going to see if I can pull another sort of dark brown here that isn't as reddish, and just kind of pull down on that lower area that's below the eye. Come up into the eyebrows, and eyebrows are hair that are growing out of this bony area with some muscles that move those brows around, and so that the hair is not a hard edge the whole time, right? If a woman puts a little makeup, maybe it gets a little more hard edged, but typically we see these kind of soft or broken transitions into the brows, which is the hair growing out of the forehead. And so we don't want to create too outlined of a description of the brows, because that will be unrealistic. It won't look real if it's too outlined. It'll look like a kind of Mr. Potato Head type of feature. And I always tease about the Mr. Potato Head features, or the Mrs. Potato Head features, of course, which if you were a kid and you had one of those toys, you got to plop the plastic features onto the potato head. It was really, really fun. The problem with it is they always have hard edges, hard outlines around the features, and that creates a kind of non-realistic look, right? And so I tease about that sometimes, that I don't want my features to look like Mr. Potato Head. I have to really vary some of the edges when they, soften. I'm coming back in with my black just to restate some of that lid line. This eyelid is really wrapping the eyeball to really help us understand its shape, and it's kind of helping us get a sense of the angle of the eyes. Really needs to wrap in on this brown-skinned subject. It's nice and dark in there. Come back and just hatch a little bit of that darker brow with some lines that are hatched in the direction of some of the hair that's growing there. Maybe we loosen it up a bit. Okay, there we go. And just stepping back for a moment. Yeah, I think I just want to push in some pupil on this eye so it starts to feel like there's life. You can see how without the pupil or the reflection in the eyes really don't have a lot of life to them. They don't sparkle. They don't signal to us that the essence or the spirit of the individual is present. Isn't that fascinating? So a lot of that has to do with really capturing that contrast and that beautiful quality in the eyes, with ultimately soon that sparkle and that dark pupil, which helps us. It's such a beautiful little focal point for the subject. All right, let's see what else I've got here. I'm just gonna push and pull at that with some hard pastel. Let that wrap down around the eyelid. I'd love to bring a little cool lavender into the whites of the eyes, because I see lavenders. There's a lot of beautiful lavenders there, but I don't want to use tons necessarily. Now, this is not white. This is, goodness, nowhere near it. But it's going to register as a light value in the midst of this, and as a cool, right? So that starts to give us a feeling of, a cooler surface in the eyeball there. I can also see kind of almost warmer colors that are at play. If I were to get perhaps something really warm and lighter like this creamy, we can even mix that in. So I always want to really carefully observe. Here's another light gray that's cooler, but not as lavender. So it's a soft violet perhaps. And then we get right in there. Okay. Yeah. So I'm about to do it. I'm about to put another dark accent in both the eyes and then put that light sparkle. And watch what happens. I just want you to see this. Watch what happens when we put the reflection in the eye. Because boom, the life of the eyes really comes alive. It's kind of fascinating. So I want to look. Remember, we've got those two spots. So before I do that, actually, I'm holding this gray. I want to make sure that I've really located that pupil on the far eye and just really made sure a few of these things are a little more clarified. That lid line again. So this tells us a lot. The lid line, the lash line, and then the brow is doing a lot of the expressing of the emotion, right? So we really want to pay attention to that as we develop our subject. Just coming a little further with these. I love creating this oversized eyes just to focus on the subject. And just a bit more brown before we, I know, I said I would, but before we put that reflection in, just add a little brown in. So when I'm doing the reflections in the eyes, I usually use a tiny little pastel, but this is a big eye, so we're gonna go for it. We're just gonna add that sparkle in on the eye over here, and then as we look, we'll add one in on the other side. And then, you know, I'll tend to evaluate it, see whether I think it's sitting where it belongs. This whole area just needs a little more dark. And I'm gonna actually come in with my lavender and carve at that edge a bit more. I can use like a hard pastel like this and just scumble over to unify that shape as well. We're starting to see the subject come to life here. How wonderful. I'm going to come in as that eye wraps around and goes under the lid. It's not as light on this side of the eyeball. So we want to really be aware of that and not let lots of really light value or white value onto that white of the eye in that area, okay? Okay, so let's see. I'm looking for a nice rich dark just to push under some of these little spots here and add a little more. I want to make sure with the brow that the character and personality of the subject is coming through. I need a little more value under the eye. Maybe come into that warm, beautiful reddish color again. Let's see. Come in on this side. I always say that when you see the mid-tone values around an eye, they have such beautiful color in them. The mid-tone values have such gorgeous chroma. So I'm adding this wonderful color. And I just want to have enough around the eye that you kind of get it. You start to see how the skin is not sort of a flat wall and then an eyeball. It's actually going in and then it's wrapping around with the lid and then it's going back and then it's coming out. So there's so many structural transitions happening. It's quite beautiful. This is a kind of a light lavender. And as that lid goes under the eye, there's a sort of neutral lavender under there. Just beautiful to see the variety of color that can express these different areas. I tell you, there's a lot of room for expression with color. Don't worry as much if you have the exact right color. The values are so important. And then perhaps like if you are using warmth, like I'm using that warm reddish, then you're going to want to use warmth around the eyes so that they feel lifelike. If you're painting a blue portrait like Picasso, then everything's blue. You're being expressive, right? So, but as soon as we get into the kind of local color of the skin, we want to tell the viewer, wow, there's color around that eye, right? I might come in with this fleshy pink and just add a little bit of that right where the lid meets the eye, and it tells the viewer, hey, there's a lot of life in this subject. There's blood at the surface of the skin. It's vibrant, it's lifelike, it's present. I want to get right into that little lid and just kind of add some of that pinkish color in, maybe wrap it up under the eye. We want that. No one wants to see the whole eyeball, right? But we want to feel the sense that there's a round sphere underneath that lid. I think that is so important, and I really tried to explain that for us today. So already we see a lot of expression, and I just want to bring a little more accenting, maybe with the black, to help us to experience. This is a soft pastel black that I'm using. Just a little more personality and gesture with these eyebrows by adding a bit more dark. Depending on the hair color of the subject, you can, emphasize the emotion which is carried through the eyebrow and the eyelid, the direction of the eyelids, right? Here we go. And then even as I chop in, I can then adjust and angle again at that wonderful, at darker values over on this side. But look at how that just comes alive. There's so much life already in those eyes. This is really already a wonderful description of expressive eyes and how it can come alive for you. And truly, that's what I have wanted to share with you during this demonstration, is how your understanding of the anatomy of the eyeball, the iris, the pupil, the way the lids layer over that ball, and the way the two balls of the eyes are on an axis and they turn together, right? They never do anything independently of each other. They always look in the same direction. That's really important. As well as how the structure of the eye socket is like a butterfly wing, and it has a bony part where the brow sits, and then some more softer, rounded muscular areas, the lid line and lash line. So important. And oftentimes softer under the eye, whereas that lash line can be harder. So powerful. I want you to practice this on your own as well and see all the opportunities that can emerge. You can study all kinds of different expressions. You can look in a mirror at yourself. It's really exciting. And again, I want to invite you just warmly to Portrait Week, because if you've enjoyed this is exciting and interesting to you to explore this, then you're going to love Portrait Week. 5 daily lessons taking place March 17th through the 21st, coming right up. And each lesson will be about an hour long, and we will do proportions and some techniques around, that aspect of the head. We will understand values and how you capture a likeness through abstraction. We'll scale up that head and really build together a likeness. And then we'll layer and develop pastel techniques that are going to bring that color to life. Understand those skin tones and how they're brought from warm to cool, from light to middle to dark. How you can really manage that and actually have a lot of room for expression within that if you understand a few things, right? And then ultimately, how do you keep it loose but refine it enough that it feels like it's living and active? And you, my friend, will have your own portrait to hang on your wall proudly by the end of Portrait Week. It's going to be fantastic. I hope you're as excited as I am. It's going to be a great time. PortraitWeek.com for all the details so that you can save your seat, and I'll see you there. This has been so much fun. Thank you for joining me for this little exploration into the power of expressive eyes and how they can be painted, in pastel. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's a joy to be with you. So much to connect with together as humanity. Each and every one of us, believe it or not, has eyes. And our eyes are the window to our soul. And so I just want to look at you right now and tell you that you, my friend, are so capable of creating beautiful, expressive paintings. So keep showing up at the easel for your dreams. Okay, my friend? Until the next time, take care.